Welcome to 25 to Thrive, a new concept that I'm bringing to you from Go-to-Market Works. The concept is that through a series of videos, I'm going to break down one important area of go-to-market into 5 constituent areas and then break that down further again into 5 core areas that supports its success, including what is the key concept, why is it important, how do you implement it, who owns it, where does it sit, and what is a measure of success for that particular key area. I'm particularly focusing this on founders who are on their journey from that initial early stage of product market fit, typically around $1 million or so in revenue, as they try and hit the 10 million and beyond revenue trajectory. Why? Well, it's because that is where stuff starts to break, right? What got you there will not get you here. Particularly 3 areas need to be looked at on that journey. Usually the playbooks and strategy that got you to 1 million either isn't well defined, which makes it very difficult to then hire and scale a team around it without them being set up for failure, or even if it is documented, it usually needs a significant update as you go through different revenue milestones and the market and product, and really everything starts to change. What unfortunately happens is playbooks and strategies remain static. And so what happens is you teach people in your business how to succeed in the old version of your product and your proposition and not the new future version. And that's where things start to break. Secondly, your operating rhythm around goal setting, tracking, communication, alignment, and feedback always needs to be upgraded and sharpened as it starts to break when your headcount starts to significantly increase. And then finally, the team that's been there, that's driven you to success so far, particularly those emerging stretch leaders. Well, unfortunately, the reality is most of them will not have the got the t-shirt experience that you need for them to be and for you to be successful in your next wave of growth. They require a lot more support if they're to remain in seat and successful. So what this series is there to do is help across those 3 areas, which to give you the foundations of the right approach to each key go-to-market area, to help you think about how to operationalize them and to give some specific tactical tips to the team around how to go and achieve success in that particular go-to-market area. Just very briefly, I've operated across a few different stages of startup and scale up, taking businesses from pre-revenue to over 5 million, and then at a larger scale from 10 to just shy of 25 million. I've operated from seed to Series C. I've even worked and led growth at a unicorn. Over that time, I've raised over, or been part of raising over 30 million in VC funding. I've interviewed literally hundreds of people, helped with their hiring, their onboarding, and ultimately the success of their career trajectories. And I've started and scaled all of those core go-to-market teams that you will very likely need for your success, from SDRs to account execs, account managers or CSMs, through to different marketing disciplines across demand generation, brand and communications, product marketing, and many others, and of course, revenue operations. So where are we going to start? Well, the very first core go-to-market area I'm going to cover off in this series is around qualified pipeline. So why qualified pipeline? Well, if you have a close rate of over 25% and some level of repeatability into your sales motion, then this becomes your rate limiting step on growth, i.e. this is the lifeblood of your revenue trajectory. You cannot close opportunities if you don't have them, right? It's a very simple, immutable truth. Therefore, it's really, really important you get very, very good at building predictable, repeatable, scalable, qualified pipeline. Now, if you haven't got any kind of repeatability at the bottom of the funnel, if your close rates are really abysmal, let's say they're under 20%, or you just don't know how you're winning those deals and you're still very, very reliant on founder, like warm introductions and founder sales, then it might be worth you rethinking how do you get to that level of initial repeatability? Otherwise, you're going to be adding pipeline into what is effectively a leaky bucket. And that's a really inefficient way to try and grow your revenue team and your overall business. But assuming you've hit that base level, that's why I'm going to focus on pipeline as a critical area of success for your overall go-to-market. So I'm going to break that down into 5 key concepts. The first is definitions, right? Have you defined the key constituent parts of your pipeline building machine? If not, then you need to, because this is how you avoid massive amounts of team friction and ambiguity. Secondly, are your leads ICP? If not, then you need to make sure that you are building qualified pipeline that are within your ICP. This avoids you wasting time on the wrong prospects and the wrong pipeline. The third is SLAs, service level agreements. Have you got them in place? Because if not, you're probably going to be wasting money because your team aren't going to be behaving and operating in an efficient way. And so they'll be inefficient and you'll be losing money needlessly. Fourth, be analytical. Right? If you're not analytical, if you're not using data to make smart decisions around how you continue to build your pipeline, then you probably get worse cost of acquisition and worse efficiencies than if you did. And then finally, most importantly of all, you might argue, what are the 5 underlying levers that you can pull to help you successfully grow pipeline time again? Let's dive into each of them. So let's first start with definitions. Definitions sound like table stakes, and they are, and they should be, but they're often missing from so many go-to-market teams, right? What is a lead in your business? Is it an email? Is it an email with a contact number? Does it have to have a job title or a company name attached to it? What actually constitutes a lead? What constitutes a new lead? Does it have to be a new account, or can it be a new person within an existing account? Does that qualify as a lead? Does it have to be within your definition of an ideal customer profile to be counted as lead or not? All really important questions that often aren't actually tackled up front when you're building your go-to-market team, and particularly when you're focused on pipeline. And that's just the beginning, right? Can you define what an MQL is? What is an SAL? So marketing qualified lead, sales accepted lead, sales qualified lead, sales qualified opportunity. In which order do they come? I've seen some teams operate where an SAL comes before an SQL, others where it's the other way around. Do you have the concept of PQLs or product qualified leads in there? And let's just take one of them, MQL, for example. What is an MQL in your business? Is it someone that's come into the pipeline, or to your CRM, should I say, and they hit a certain number of points based on a behavioral threshold? Do they need no behavioral or points threshold at all? Is it just if they hit a certain firmographic criteria that they become an MQL? Is it something else entirely? Then how do you define attribution within your organization and your reporting? Is it last touch? Is it first touch? Is it influenced? What's an inbound versus an outbound versus a self-source lead? Comes up all the time as sources of friction and argument amongst team. No, this was my lead. No, it was an outbound lead. I prospected to it. Yes, but it came in through this form, so it must be an inbound. All sorts of issues, right? Make sure you set and define what an inbound, outbound, and self-source lead actually is. And then finally, what is qualified pipeline, right? What are the minimum qualification criteria that a prospect needs to hit to be considered qualified pipeline? Are you using something like BANT around budget, authority, need, and timing? Is it something bespoke? Is it something else entirely? Do you have one at all? Definitions seems easy, opens up a can of worms, really necessary to go through the pain. That's because chaos loves a vacuum, but you as a founder or a leader will not love that chaos or that vacuum. Typically what happens is there's then a land grab for attribution. If you haven't got those definitions locked up tight, this creates friction and frustration across the teams. Often it then results in lots of wasted money and investment because you think you're doing really well on landing X number of MQLs or leads, but it turns out they're complete waste of time because you didn't lock down what a good lead or a good MQL or a good SQL was. And even worse, You then set up really wonky reporting. Your analytics becomes pretty useless. You have to go through a new cycle of resetting everything up in your CRM, and you junk all the historical data that you've built up over the past 6, 12, 18, 24 months. It's a real nightmare. Best to get it set up front. So how do you then think about implementing these definitions? Well, the first is you've got to get together as a team. You've got to brainstorm what and ask all those questions that I've just asked, but together as a team in a group. Once you've agreed on them, get them down on paper and codify what all those definitions are. Build them into whatever source of truth you're utilizing in your organization. Hopefully it's something like Go-to-Market Works, but if not, just make sure it's down whatever your documentation system source of truth is, and make sure you then certify that the existing team and anyone else that's going to work on pipeline, including new starters, are certified as understanding what those definitions are. Then make sure you actually utilize them. Make sure they're built into your CRM, use them in meetings, use them in reports. And then finally, do make sure you review them periodically. As I said, the growth trajectory from 1 to 10 is pretty mad. Things may well change or break. It's really important that you're not operating with useless or old definitions as you continue on that growth trajectory. Who should own this? Well, probably by the time you're hitting 1 million, it's likely you've got someone in RevOps, so they are the ideal person to lead this project and to nail down your definitions. But if you don't have RevOps, then it is whoever is running the sales and marketing teams. If that is one person, fantastic. If it's not, make sure you get their heads together and they are jointly agreeing on what those definitions are. And then finally, how do you know that those definitions are being operationalized? Well, firstly, there is a lack of arguments amongst your team. You shouldn't have people coming to you saying, hey, this was ours, or we're having really bad MQLs, or we don't know whether we're being successful or not, quite frankly. So silence is golden in this case. Your analytics should be clean and usable and utilized for strong reporting right the way up to board level. You should start to see improved conversion rates because you're all working off the same definition and the same page, which means you can start to optimize each stage of the funnel because you're very clear on what it means to be at that stage of the pipeline funnel. And that should lead to greater efficiencies and therefore lowered cost of acquisition. So many great measures of success once you've nailed down your definitions. So let's say you've nailed down your definitions. The next thing to think about when building a pipeline engine is ICP leads. So what are those ICP leads? So these are leads that match your ideal customer profile. That's what the acronym ICP stands for, ideal customer profile, right? Now, at a minimum, this means that they have the right firmographic profile. So what do I mean by that? Firmographic profile is essentially to businesses what demographic profiles are to individuals. So that's things like a company's industry, their revenue profile, it's the industry that they're in, it's how many employees they are, it's their headquarters, all those kind of base level things that you can typically find quite easily online, even simply from their company profile on LinkedIn. Now, you may want to get even more in depth around what an ICP lead is. It could involve behavioral information, such as are they hiring in a particular area? Have they just had a fundraise? Are they, have they got a particular level of stock market performance? And there are many different behavioral triggers you might want to consider. And then also technographic information. Are they users of a particular software solution that you can integrate with, but maybe you can't integrate with another type of solution? So for example, does your prospect or your ICP use Salesforce because you only integrate your solution with Salesforce and you can't work with businesses that are on HubSpot at the moment until that's developed out in your product? That would be an example of a technographic bit of ICP profiling. Now, why are ICP leads so important? Well, it's essentially like having the right diet fed into your pipeline, right? It's not all junk food. Junk food feels good, but that's like adding a ton of leads that aren't actually part of your target ICP into your pipeline. It feels full, but actually it leads to bloat and ultimately lots of bad health with your pipeline. You want to only feed them the good, nutritious ICP lead stuff. They should therefore have a higher propensity to buy. It should lead to a much more repeatable tighter feedback spread, because if you're only targeting a very specific ICP, you're going to learn very quickly what works for them and what doesn't, instead of trying to target a whole range and spread of different types of companies. It should lead to lower churn once you've brought them all the way through to close one, and ultimately lead to better margins as well, because actually having the right ICP utilizing your product will mean there's less friction. It should mean that there's less difficulty in terms of managing them, which leads to better margins. It means you won't get distracted with lower value leads, so you can stay sharp and you're not wasting your core sales reps' time. And also, overall, you become far more efficient. That should say you'll be less efficient if you're not targeting the right ICP leads. Now, how do you implement ICP leads? Well, the first is very similar to the last stage. You've got to define them. You then set the criteria in your CRM, whether you're using HubSpot, Pipedrive, Salesforce, whatever it is. Make sure you have a clear definition baked into your CRM that means you can very quickly and easily have an automated target ICP list and a non-target ICP list of leads for many inbound inquiries that are coming in. Again, you need to make sure that your team are certified on what ICP is and is not, so you know that they know what ICP is and there's no excuses for targeting or bringing in the wrong type of leads. You should run all of your reports on ICP leads, so have that filter on any of your pipeline and lead creation reports. And keep an eye on the proportion of how many leads are coming into your CRM and your system that are ICP versus not. That's going to give you a good sense of the health of your overall, particularly inbound marketing efforts, but also to an extent your outbound as well. Make sure that your outbound team is focusing on the right prospects and the right accounts. You should, of course, focus any of your marketing campaigns and your prospecting and outbound campaigns only on ICP targets. And then, as always, refine these over time. So where does it sit? Again, it should really sit with RevOps, assuming you have that resource in the team. Or if not, it's going to be whoever runs the sales and marketing teams. And then it also needs to be responsibility of any line managers. So whoever is leading demand generation, whoever's leading the SDR team, they're also real custodians of whether you're bringing in the right healthy type of ICP leads versus just any old lead into the system. Finally, in terms of tracking success here, you should be looking at what is your cost per ICP lead versus simply a cost per lead. What percentage of ICP to non-ICP leads are you producing over different time horizons? What is the sales velocity of your ICP leads? So that's looking at the number and value or average value of the opportunities you're bringing in, the win rates divided by the sales cycle time. That's going to give you a sense of whether your ICP leads are running through the pipeline to becoming customers and clients at the right type of rate. And if not, you might want to question whether you need to rethink your definition of what an ICP is. And then ultimately, you want to review trends over time. So from ICP, let's move on to SLAs, service level agreements. So what are service level agreements? They are simply a contractual agreement. It doesn't have to be written in blood. It doesn't have to be on a starched piece of document of paper, but it does need to be a clearly written document that different parties that need to be involved in your SLAs have read, recognized, and agreed to. And ultimately, it's around focusing on three key things: timing, actions, and quality across critical workflows. So a classic one is, what is our SLA for the SDR team? Maybe it's the specific market response or inbound SDR team. In what time frame will they contact an inbound lead, right? That becomes an SLA. So that's really focused on timing. But a good SLA will also talk about, well, what counts as the action? So does it need to have been a phone call? Is a simple email outreach sufficient? Is a connect on LinkedIn okay? And then what is the quality you would expect from that? Do you expect the next thing that they do is to qualify them? Is it to arrange a call with them? So this is where service level agreements are really useful, because it helps you understand exactly what people should be doing at each particular juncture of a workflow. So why they're important? Well, they help set clear, high standards, right? If you don't define, again, what good looks like in a particular workflow, people will simply make it up or potentially just default to the lowest common denominator, which is not good for building a high performance, well-functioning go-to-market team. It also ensures smooth operations, so there's no ambiguity around what happens from A to B across your entire go-to-market workflow. It really improves the buyer experience, because they will get faster response times and better quality responses from more well-trained reps. And it does mean you're not burning pounds or dollars, right? I've seen this, unfortunately, in various different situations where you're spending a ton of money, and particularly from a marketing and demand gen perspective, to get all those leads into the system, and then no one contacts them. Sometimes it's not for an hour, 12 hours, 24 hours. I've seen even worse than that. You need to make sure that if you're spending the money and the time and the effort to get your team to bring leads in, that there's an appropriate SLA in terms of how you respond to them. And it's not just at that point. There's also really important other points you need SLAs, such as what's the handover from an account exec to a CSM like. When does a CS resource need to step in for an account manager? There's many different points. You will have to figure out what that is for your business, which is how to implement them. So the first is analyze what your existing workflows is, diagram it on a whiteboard, get everyone in the room together, figure out, okay, what is the buyer cycle and the buyer journey across our organization, and at what points do we expect our teams to step in? Once you've done the diagramming, the brainstorming, and the codification of that, then once again, make sure the team is certified or tested or quizzed on what that looks like, so that they're all 100% on the same page. You then want to actually report on those SLAs. So are the team actually sticking to them? That should be at least a monthly review and report. You should manage to them, right? Make sure that the team in one-to-ones, in their performance reviews, you're looking at how well they're adhering to the SLAs that you agreed to that were important as part of the team. And then, of course, like all of these areas, continue to review them periodically to make sure they make sense. As always, with these, with this area of your go-to-market, the real owner is going to be RevOps or whoever runs the sales marketing team in lieu of that. And then again, line managers must take an awful lot of responsibility for ensuring their team are bought into and adhering to those SLAs. In terms of tracking success, you would expect that there's going to be an increased velocity of lead to cash, i.e., you should be able to get leads and prospects through your whole buying cycle faster, to the point of getting cash in the bank and revenue recognized by having a strong set of SLAs. It's hugely, don't want to underplay that. Lead to cash is an really important principle, particularly at times that go-to-market teams and overall startups and scale-ups are thinking about cash efficiency. The faster you can cycle a lead through to cash, the more cash efficient you are as a business, the better your cash flows are going to be, and the less likely you'll be reliant on external funding and factors, the more in control of your own destiny you'll be. So you're not a small point here. You will improve conversion rates from one point to the next in your funnel, because you're really all on the same page in terms of what good looks like, and that over time will also introduce a lowered cost of acquisition. So now let's talk about becoming analytical. So what is being analytical? You talk about people talk about analytics an awful lot. Well, for me, it's quite simple. It's the ability to make informed decisions based on objective data. Right? Objective is really important here, and so is making informed decisions. Now, data doesn't mean just because you have the data doesn't mean you have to make the decision around it, but you should be informed by it. It should provide insights to you when it comes to decision making. So being analytical is really important when it comes to building pipeline, because it means ultimately you can spot opportunities and issues, such as, oh dear, we don't have enough pipeline coverage to meet our future revenue targets and obligations, or the quality of the pipeline is going down, or what was working is no longer working. We need to rethink what our ICP is, right? It will also give you a sense of where are new opportunities. Oh, we see this type of persona or this type of stakeholder is super engaged. We're able to massively increase our sales velocity in this particular area. Let's go and find more pipeline that looks like this. It also, of course, shapes behavior. Those insights and those decision making that comes from being analytical will help you set particular parameters around what your team should be doing. It will help you set things like SLAs. So, for example, in a previous role, we noticed that there was a significant drop-off in terms of being able to turn an MQL into an SQL after there'd been an MQL for, it was just over 2 weeks. And so we put an awful lot of effort into really making sure that those MQLs became SQLs before that 2-week cliff. And then after that, we didn't, it wasn't really worthwhile spending an SDR's time and resource on trying to still convert that MQL. We were able to send it to nurture and do it a little bit more cost efficient scale. Now, that's not going to be the same in every business, but we were able to use our own analytics and insights to make that decision. That shaped our behavior and the way we structured our teams and our approaches to converting MQLs to pipeline. The objectivity also helps reduce time wasted on internal debates, arguments. So it helps you, be really clear, again, on what good is and what good looks like. So it stops any ambiguity. And then finally, it helps you make those decisions faster. It allows you to set better, more credible and achievable goals, and essentially really helps you streamline other planning as well. If you've got good data, if you're analytical, it tends to make the whole planning process that much smoother, faster. So how do you become more analytical as a business? Well, firstly, you need to set up your CRM or your marketing automation platforms, your maps, with the right definitions. What is your ICP? And utilizing it to track your SLAs. You, of course, need to run meetings and make decisions based on data and dashboards. It should just become an ingrained habit that when you're having meetings, you're using data and dashboards to make decisions. If you're not, you're probably not being very analytical and data-driven as an organization. You need to report on all those different aspects very consistently. Consistency is key to being more analytical. You don't want to be constantly changing definitions or changing the reports. That's usually a sure sign that you've not got a great analytical bedrock in the business. You want to consistently review trends over months, over weeks, over quarters. You need to, of course, make sure that you're driving insights. So it's not good enough to simply present data. What you also need to be doing is saying, well, what does this data tell us? What are our hypotheses? What are the insights that we're able to drive from this data? And then, of course, you need to act on those insights. Being analytical without it affecting behaviors and driving to actions is kind of just an academic exercise. So where does it sit? Again, RevOps, as you might expect, RevOps in particular is often synonymous with data and analytics within a revenue or go-to-market team. If not, again, it sits to whoever's your most senior sales and or marketing leaders. Again, line managers should be encouraged to be as analytical as possible within their team meetings. In terms of tracking success, you've got to ask yourself, do meetings include data and dashboards on a regular basis? Is your reporting consistent, or is it fluctuating and changing over time, both in terms of definitions and what's covered in the reports? Can you see and understand what's happening in the organization from the data and analytics you're presented? Does it actually make sense? Does it paint a picture? You shouldn't really be having blind panics when it comes around to your reporting to the board or fundraising time. It should all be in place by and large already. And you should, with an analytical approach to building pipeline, improve your overall efficiency ratios, which should continue to trend in the right way. So let's finish with the 5 key growth levers that you need to take into consideration when building your pipeline. So they are, what is your message? What's the creative? What's your targeting like? What's the call to action? And what's the conversion experience once someone's taken that action? Nailing these 5 things These are really the 5 critical inputs that will allow you to build consistent pipeline. So they will help you determine success, both in terms of efficiency and effectiveness across your pipeline. What's fantastic about them is they are entirely in your control. So they are the inputs that you can control. You can test, iterate, and optimize for them. They're objectively measurable. You can understand them, touch them, feel them, see them. So they're really easy inputs to change and manipulate. And they apply it across any pipeline building channel. So all those 5 things are equally applicable to building pipeline from an SDR and prospecting perspective as they are from building it from a marketing and demand generation perspective. So how do you implement these 5 areas? Well, always run them through the prism of your ICP and persona. So when you're thinking about, well, what is the message? What kind of creative should we be thinking about? How are we going to apply our targeting? What's the right type of call to action? Always think, well, what is going to be the right set of those things that appeal to our ideal customer profile and the persona within that ICP that we're trying to sell to? If you're going to be testing and learning and constantly optimizing them, which you should be, then don't change up multiple variables. It's important that you can see which one is having a positive or negative impact on the outcome, but do always be testing all the time. And then use those 5 variables or levers as a checklist in campaign planning and pipeline reviews, so that you know you're being very intentional about each area or each lever that drives the success of your pipeline. Slightly different in terms of who owns this and where it sits, not necessarily RevOps. This is really any team that's building pipeline, in particular any team leader. So whether it's your head of the SDR team, head of business development, your demand gen manager or head of demand gen, they are the ones that should really be using this as a critical checklist of success against their teams. But even like every individual contributor can absolutely have that checklist within their locker to make sure that they're thinking about the 5 core areas that drive success. In terms of tracking success, you want to think about the quality of the pipeline you're building. So do they improve your sales velocity without increasing the cost or decreasing the quantity, i.e. a better quality leads within ICP entering your pipeline? Quantity, so can you acquire more of those high quality leads without them increasing your cost, so you're not spending too much more on getting that quantity, and that they're not decreasing in quality, which would be then affecting your sales velocity. And of course, cost. So can that cost consistently be lowered without impacting on the previous 2 areas of quality and quantity? And then overall, your investment to qualified pipeline value ratio should be improving, i.e. you should be spending less over time to build more qualified pipeline value. And that's everything. So those are the 5 core areas of building a really strong pipeline generating engine. Each of those 5 areas broken down into their 5 constituent parts. Hope it was really useful, practical, applicable. Any questions at all, would love to connect with you on LinkedIn, or please do sign up for my newsletter, Go-to-Market Works newsletter, where it's a weekly sharing of tips, advice, and other areas of interest for go-to-market leaders and SaaS founders. Thanks very much. Best of luck with building pipeline. More of these in the series to come.